They say you cannot put a price on family, but my parents certainly tried. They demanded I hand over every cent of my daughter's college savings to fund their gifted grandson's destiny. Claiming it was my duty to step aside for genius, instead of bowing down, I built an empire out of their rejection. Now, with a net worth of $200 million, I am finally the one holding the checkbook and the power. The fluorescent lights in the open-plan office of Lumapath Media always seemed to hum louder after 5 in the evening. A low-frequency buzz that burrowed right behind my eyes. I rubbed my temples, staring at the spreadsheet that had been my entire world for the last 8 hours. The quarterly engagement metrics were up, not just up, but significantly above the projections I had set 6 months ago. I saved the file, closed my laptop, and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since morning. I was 32 years old, a marketing analyst in a city that felt perpetually under construction, and I was tired. But as I gathered my purse and walked out into the cool evening air of Brookridge, that fatigue was tempered by a quiet, vibrating sense of accomplishment. My car, a silver sedan that was 12 years old and beginning to make a concerning rattle when I idled at stoplights, was parked in the far corner of the lot. I patted the dashboard affectionately as I turned the key. We just needed to hold it together a little longer. The drive home was my decompression chamber. I navigated the familiar streets, passing the shiny new condos downtown where the tech workers lived, and made my way toward the older, tree-lined avenues of the east side. My apartment complex was a beige, 3-story walk-up called The Willows. It was not luxurious. The carpets in the hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old dust, and the water pressure in the shower was a negotiation rather than a guarantee. But it was safe, it was clean, and it was ours. I unlocked the door to Unit 2B and kicked off my heels. "Mom?" a voice called out from the living room. "In here, Emma," I called back. My 10-year-old daughter was sprawled on the rug, surrounded by a chaotic explosion of colored pencils and sketchbook pages. She had her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there was a smudge of graphite on her left cheek. She didn't look up immediately, her hand moving rapidly across the paper, shading the wing of what looked like a dragon. I walked over and kissed the top of her head. It smelled of strawberry shampoo. "How was school?" I asked, loosening the belt of my trench coat. "Fine," she said, finally looking up with a grin that showed off the slight gap in her front teeth. I was secretly saving to fix, just in case she wanted braces later. "Mrs. Gable let us have extra reading time because we finished the math module early. That is great." I said, "I'm going to get changed." "Pizza night?" "Pizza night," she confirmed, punching the air. I went into my bedroom, which was just big enough for a queen-sized bed and a second-hand dresser, and changed into leggings and an oversized sweater. Before I went back out, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened my banking app. This was my secret ritual. Some people scrolled through social media to unwind. I looked at a number. I tapped into the investment accounts tab and scrolled down to the 529 college savings plan labeled Emma's Future. The screen loaded, and there it was, $79,842.16. I stared at it, the way one might stare at a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. That number was 10 years of brown bag lunches. It was 10 years of dyeing my own hair over the sink instead of going to a salon. It was vacations we didn't take, the new car I didn't buy, and the clothes I wore until the fabric thinned out. Every bonus, every tax refund, every spare $20 bill I could scrape together went into that account. It was not just money, it was a promise. It was the guarantee that Emma would not start her adult life drowning in debt the way I had. It was the wall I was building, brick by brick, to keep the world from crushing her. Almost $80,000. I closed the app, feeling the tension in my shoulders dissolve. We were okay. As long as that number kept growing, we were okay. Friday nights were our sanctuary. We ordered a large pepperoni pizza from the place down the street, the one that used slightly too much grease but had the perfect crust, and settled onto the beige sofa. I opened my laptop again, but this time, not for work. All right, Madam CFO, I said, balancing a slice of pizza on a paper plate. Let us look at the monthly budget. Emma scrambled up next to me, wiping her hands on a napkin. She loved this. I had never wanted money to be a source of fear for her, so I had turned it into a game. We were a team, managing our little corporation of two. Okay, Emma said, pointing at the screen. The electric bill was lower this month. Good catch. I said, it is because we were careful about turning off the lights in the hallway. That saves us about $15. Where should we put that $15? The fun fund? She suggested, eyeing me hopefully. I pretended to consider it. The fun fund is looking pretty healthy. We have enough in there for the movies next week. What about the rainy day fund? She sighed dramatically but nodded. Okay, the rainy day fund. Because tires go flat. Exactly, I said, typing the transfer. Because tires go flat, and because life happens. We went through the groceries, the rent, and the insurance. It was mundane, boring arithmetic to anyone else, but to me, it was intimate. I was teaching her that control was possible. I was showing her that we did not have to be victims of circumstance. When we were done, I closed the laptop. You are good at this, I told her. You have a good head for numbers. She shrugged, picking at a pepperoni. I like seeing where it goes. It makes sense. Noah says math is for finding the secrets of the universe, but I like it for buying pizza. I laughed. Noah says a lot of things. Noah was my nephew, my brother Lucas's son. He was 11, just a year older than Emma, but he occupied a very different space in the family ecosystem. Is Grandma and Grandpa's dinner this Sunday? Emma asked, her voice dropping a little. Yes, I said, keeping my tone bright. It will be nice. I think Grandma is making roast beef. Emma nodded, but I saw the slight dimming in her eyes. She did not dislike her grandparents, and she certainly didn't dislike Noah. But she was perceptive. She understood the hierarchy of attention in the Harris family, even if she never said it out loud. Sunday afternoon arrived with a gray, overcast sky that matched my sudden drop in mood as we drove out to Ridgefield Heights. My parents lived in a sprawling 2-story colonial on a cul-de-sac where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. It was the house I had grown up in, a house that projected stability and upper-middle-class success. I parked the rattling silver sedan behind Lucas's brand-new black SUV. It looked like a shark parked next to a minnow. Ready? I asked Emma. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest. Ready. We walked up the path, and before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open. My mother, Diane, stood there, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, sprayed into a helmet of blonde stiff resistance. There you are, she said, offering her cheek for a kiss. You are 5 minutes late. Scarlett, did you take the highway? I told you there is construction on the ramp. Hi, Mom, I said, brushing her cheek. We took the back roads. It was just slow. She looked down at Emma. Hello, sweetie. Did you bring your coloring book again? It is a sketchbook. Grandma, Emma said softly. Well, just make sure you do not get graphite on the tablecloth, Diane said, ushering us inside. The hallway of my parents' house was a museum dedicated to the triumphs of the male line. As we walked toward the kitchen, we passed the gallery wall. There was Lucas at age 10 holding a soccer trophy, Lucas at 18 in his graduation cap, Lucas at 25 getting his MBA. And then, the torch passing. Noah holding a science fair ribbon. Noah with his robotics team. Noah receiving a certificate of excellence from the mayor. There were probably 30 framed photos on that wall. I glanced toward the refrigerator in the kitchen. On the side, attached with a single magnet from a local plumber, was a small watercolor Emma had done 2 years ago. It was curling at the edges. My father, Charles, was in the kitchen, carving a massive roast. He was a tall man who had grown heavy in his retirement, his face settling into a permanent expression of critical assessment. Scarlett, he nodded. Engine sounds a bit rough on your car. It is fine. Dad, I said, just a loose heat shield. Lucas and his wife, Jenna, were already seated at the dining table, sipping red wine. Lucas looked like a sharper, more expensive version of our father. He wore a crisp, button-down shirt on a Sunday, sleeves rolled up just so. "Hey, Scarl," Lucas said, lifting his glass. Noah was sitting at the head of the table, tapping away on a tablet. He didn't look up. "Noah, say hello to your aunt and cousin," Jenna said gently. Noah glanced up, blinking as if waking from a trance. "Oh, hi. I am just coding a simulation for the kinetic stabilizers. It is almost done." "Incredible," my father said, abandoning the roast to lean over Noah's shoulder. "At 11 years old, kinetic stabilizers. The boy is a marvel." "He really is," my mother chimed in, bringing a bowl of potatoes to the table. "He is simply on a different operating level." Emma sat down quietly at her usual spot near the end of the table and opened her sketchbook. She began to draw the centerpiece, a bowl of wax fruit. We settled into the rhythm of dinner. The food was delicious, as it always was. My mother was an excellent cook, a skill she wielded like a weapon. If you criticized her, you were ungrateful for the pot roast. "So," Lucas said, leaning back, "big news at the firm. Camden Analytics is opening a new division for predictive modeling, and guess who they tapped to lead the transition team?" I smiled. "That is amazing. Lucas, congratulations, Vice President of Strategy." My mother beamed, reaching over to squeeze Lucas's hand. "We are so proud. We always knew you had that executive mindset. Even when you were little, you were always organizing the other children. It is a lot of responsibility," Lucas said with a humble shrug that felt rehearsed. "But the compensation package is significant. It puts us in a different bracket." "That is wonderful," I said, and I meant it. I didn't begrudge my brother his success, even if the constant praise felt like a spotlight that left everything else in shadow. "Actually," I said, seizing a lull in the conversation, "I had some good news this week, too. My performance review came back on Friday. I got the highest rating in the department, and they gave me an 8% raise." There was a brief pause. My father chewed his roast beef thoughtfully. 8%, he said. "That helps with inflation." "I suppose. It is more than a cost of living adjustment." "Dad," I said, feeling that familiar prickle of defensiveness, "it is a merit increase. They are really happy with how I handled the Q4 campaigns." "Well, that is good, dear," my mother said, pouring more water into Noah's glass. "Stability is important for a single mother. You need to keep things steady." She turned immediately to Noah. "Now, tell us about the competition next month. Is it true there are teams coming from Japan?" I took a sip of my water, swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't that they were mean, it was just that in the narrative of our family, I was the supporting character. I was the sturdy, reliable background extra who kept things steady while the heroes went on adventures. Noah launched into a detailed explanation of the robotics competition. He used words like torque and autonomous processing. My parents nodded along, mouths slightly open, as if witnessing a sermon. "He is the genius of the family," my father declared, gesturing with his fork. "No doubt about it. We have to make sure nothing gets in his way. Talent like that is a resource. You do not squander it." Emma's pencil scratched softly against the paper. She was shading the shadows of the wax apples. Eventually, the conversation drifted. The roast was eaten. The plates were cleared. My mother brought out a cherry pie. "So, Scarlett," my mother said, cutting a slice, "how are the finances holding up? You are managing?" "I am doing well, Mom," I said. "We are sticking to the budget." "And the savings?" she asked. "You are still putting money into that account for Emma?" She asked it casually, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that I should have noticed. "Yes," I said, feeling a surge of pride I couldn't suppress. "Actually, I just checked it. It is finally around $80,000. The fork paused halfway to my father's mouth. "80,000? "Almost," I said. "I have been maxing out the contributions for the last 3 years. The market has been good. That is, substantial," Lucas said. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time all night. I didn't realize you had squirreled away that much. I drive a 12-year-old car, Lucas, I said lightly. It adds up. My mother smiled. But it was a tight, thin thing. Well, that is very disciplined of you. Scarlett, very disciplined. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't anything I could point to. No one said anything hostile. But the temperature seemed to drop. My father exchanged a look with my mother. Lucas took a long sip of his wine. Emma looked up from her drawing. Can I have whipped cream? Of course, sweetie, my mother said. But her eyes were still on me. After dessert, the dynamic changed. My mother took Emma into the living room to watch a nature documentary, leaving the three adults, my father, Lucas, and me, sitting at the dining table. The remnants of the pie sat between us. Scarlett, Lucas said, leaning forward on his elbows, I wanted to tell you something before the official announcement goes out. Oh? I asked. Noah got in. He said, Got in where? Sterling Ridge Institute, my father said, his voice reverent. I blinked. The boarding school? The one near the coast? It is the premier STEM academy in the Northeast, Lucas corrected. They only take 50 students a year. It is a pipeline to MIT, Stanford, Caltech. If he goes there, his future is written in gold. Wow, I said, that is incredible. Lucas, you must be thrilled. We are, Lucas said, but he didn't look thrilled. He looked tense. The tuition is steep. It is $65,000 a year, and that does not include room and board. I let out a low whistle. That is, a lot. It is an investment, my father said. He was sitting very still, his hands clasped on the table. Well, with your promotion, surely you can manage it? I asked Lucas. Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. The promotion is great, but it comes with a vesting schedule for the stock options. The cash flow is not there yet. And Jenna and I just bought the lake house last year, so our liquidity is tied up. I nodded sympathetically. That is tough. But maybe financial aid? We make too much for aid on paper, Lucas said bitterly, but not enough to just write a check for $65,000 without feeling it. He looked at me. His eyes were dark. Serious. This is the kind of chance kids like us never got. Scarlett, you know that. We went to public school. We did fine. But we didn't have this. Noah has a gift. It would be a sin to let it wither because of logistics. I nodded. I hope you figure it out. He really is a smart kid. There was silence. A long, stretching silence that made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. My father cleared his throat. It sounded like a gavel banging on wood. We have been discussing a solution, he said. Oh? I asked, reaching for my water glass. We need to think about this as a family unit. My father continued. We need to reallocate resources to where they will have the highest yield. I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. Reallocate? Lucas looked at his hands, then at me. Scarlett, you are sitting on $80,000 in a 529 plan for Emma. I put the glass down, very slowly. Yes, I said. For Emma? Right, Lucas said. But Emma is 10. She is 8 years away from college. Noah is accepted now. The tuition is due next month. I stared at him. I couldn't process what he was saying. It didn't make sense. Are you asking to borrow money? I asked. Not borrow, exactly. My father said. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice he used to explain why I couldn't have a pony when I was 6. We are suggesting a transfer, if you use that fund to pay for Noah's first year and a half. It gets him into the system. By the time that money runs out, Lucas's stock options will have vested, and he can take over. I looked from my father to my brother. I waited for the punchline. I waited for them to laugh and say they were messing with me. You want me to give you Emma's college fund? I asked. My voice sounded thin, high. Lucas leaned in. It is sitting there. Scarlett, it is doing nothing. And let us be honest. Emma is a great kid. She is sweet, but she is not. She is not Noah. I felt a cold flush rise up my neck. What is that supposed to mean? It means she is resilient, my father interjected smoothly. Emma is a survivor. She is like you. She works hard. She will be fine at a state school. She can get scholarships later. She has time. But Noah? This is a critical window. If he misses this intake, he falls behind the cohort. We have a duty to invest in genius. I looked at the doorway to the living room. I could hear the faint sound of the television, the narrator talking about lions on the savannah. Emma was in there, drawing her pictures, completely unaware that the two men who were supposed to protect her were currently negotiating away her future. You cannot be serious. I whispered, we are very serious. My father said, it is the logical move. Scarlett, it is about the greater good of the family. I looked at Lucas. He didn't look ashamed. He looked expectant. He looked like he thought this was a perfectly reasonable request. You want me to empty my daughter's account, which took me 10 years to build. So you do not have to sell your lake house? I asked. Do not make it sound like that, Lucas snapped. It is not about the lake house. It is about assets. It is about leverage. It is about my daughter, I said, my voice rising. Keep your voice down, my father hissed. There is no need to upset the children. This is insane, I said, pushing my chair back. You guys discussed this before I got here? We were looking for solutions, Lucas said. We knew you would be emotional about it, but if you look at the numbers— I am not looking at the numbers, I said, standing up. I am looking at you. You are asking me to sacrifice Emma for Noah. We are asking you to help the family, my father said, his face hardening. You have always been possessive. Scarlett, this money, it is family money. It came from your earnings. Yes, but we supported you. We helped you when Emma was born. You babysat once a month. Dad, I said, I paid for everything else. I felt the room spinning slightly. The betrayal wasn't just in the request. It was in the logic. They truly believed that Noah's potential was worth more than Emma's reality. They believed that because I was a single mother, because I was resilient, I should be the one to bleed. I cannot do it, I said. The answer is no. Lucas slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Do not be selfish. Scarlett, think about someone other than yourself for once. This boy is going to change the world. Then the world can pay for him, I said, shaking, because I am paying for Emma. I turned and walked toward the living room. Scarlett, my father called after me, his voice low and dangerous. If you walk away now, we are not done talking about this. I didn't answer. I walked into the living room. Emma looked up, her eyes wide. She sensed the energy immediately. Pack up your pencils. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We are leaving, but the movie isn't over, she said. We have to go. Now. She didn't argue. She scrambled to put her colored pencils back in their case. I grabbed my purse. As we walked to the front door, my mother came out of the kitchen. She looked pale, her hands twisting her apron. Scarlett, she said, please, do not be rash. I looked at her. I looked at the photos on the wall. The shrine to the men of the Harris family. Good night. Mom, I said. I opened the door and ushered Emma out into the cool night air. We walked to my rattling silver car, the darkness swallowing us. Behind me, the warm yellow light of my parents' house spilled onto the lawn. But for the first time in my life, it didn't look inviting. It looked like a trap I had just barely escaped. I buckled Emma in. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice small. I started the engine. The heat shield rattled, a harsh, metallic sound. Yes, baby, I said, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Everything is going to be fine. But as I pulled away from the curb, leaving the perfect house and the perfect cul-de-sac behind, I knew that was a lie. This wasn't over. They had shown me who they were, and they had shown me what they thought of us. They wanted the money, and they didn't care what it cost me to give it to them. The text message from my father arrived on Tuesday afternoon, sandwiched between a notification for a dentist appointment and a spam alert about extended car warranties. It was brief, devoid of emotion, and ominous in its simplicity. Come over tonight at 7. We need to finish our conversation. Come alone. We need to talk like adults. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and flickered off. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. The kind you feel when you miss a step on a staircase in the dark. Talk like adults. The implication was clear. My refusal on Sunday had been a tantrum. A childish outburst that needed to be corrected by the wiser heads of the family. I arranged for Emma to stay with her best friend, Sophie. Is everything okay? Emma asked as I dropped her off, her backpack slung over one shoulder. You look weird. Mom, I forced a smile, smoothing her bangs away from her forehead. I am just tired. Baby, Grandma and Grandpa want to talk about some boring tax stuff. You go have fun with Sophie. I watched her run up the walkway to Sophie's house, her ponytail bouncing. She was so unburdened, so gloriously unaware of the machinery grinding away in the background of her life. I intended to keep her that way. The drive to Ridgefield Heights felt different this time. Sunday had been a blindsiding. Tonight was a summons. I gripped the steering wheel of my sedan, listening to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I had spent the last 48 hours oscillating between rage and doubt. Had I been too harsh? Was I being selfish? My parents had conditioned me well over 3 decades to question my own reality, to view my boundaries as betrayals. But then I would think of the number, $80,000. I would think of the ramen noodles I ate for 3 years straight, so I could put away an extra $50 a month. I would think of Emma's face when she talked about being a marine biologist, and the doubt would harden into something cold and sharp. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was blazing with light. Lucas's SUV was there again. They were waiting. I let myself in with my key. The air inside smelled of lemon polish and brewing coffee, a scent that usually signaled comfort, but tonight smelled like a sterile boardroom. They were seated at the kitchen table, the same spot where they had ambushed me on Sunday. My father sat at the head, a manila folder closed in front of him. Lucas sat to his right, typing on his phone, looking bored but tense. My mother was at the stove, pouring coffee into 4 ceramic mugs. Sit down. Scarlett, my father said. He did not say hello. I sat opposite Lucas. My mother placed a mug in front of me, black, no sugar. Just the way I drank it when I needed to stay awake, or when I needed to taste something bitter to keep myself grounded. We have put together a proposal, my father began, placing his hand flat on the folder. Since Sunday, we have realized that perhaps we were too informal. We want to treat this professionally. This is a family investment strategy. He opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the polished oak table toward me. I looked down. It was a typed document, formatted like a contract. Capital reallocation agreement. The header read in bold, serif font. I scanned the paragraphs. It was all there, laid out in sterile, legalistic language. The undersigned, Scarlett Harris, agrees to liquidate the assets held in the 529 College Savings Plan beneficiary Emma Harris. Proceeds to be directed to the Sterling Ridge Institute for the tuition and board of Noah Harris. Repayment terms to be determined at a future date based on family liquidity. I looked up. My mouth felt dry. You typed this up? I asked. It is just a draft, Lucas said, finally putting his phone down. To show you we are serious, we are not just asking for a handout. Scarlett, we are structuring a loan without a repayment date, I pointed out, tapping the paper. To be determined, that means never, it means when we can, my mother said softly, taking her seat. When Lucas's stock vests, when Noah graduates and gets a scholarship to MIT, then we can help Emma. Help her? I repeated. It is her money. It is already hers. Scarlett, look at the timeline, my father said, his voice taking on that lecture hall quality I hated. Noah is entering a pivotal phase. The next 2 years are determinative. If he goes to Sterling Ridge, he is set for life. If he goes to the local public high school, he is just another smart kid in a sea of mediocrity. We cannot let that asset go to waste. You keep calling him an asset. I said, he is a child. He is a gifted child. Lucas corrected sharply. Do not pretend you do not see the difference. Emma she is great. She is artistic. She is sweet. But Noah is testing in the 99th percentile for spatial reasoning. He is building neural networks in his bedroom. So that makes him worth more? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. That makes his future worth stealing my daughter's future for? It is not stealing, my mother pleaded. It is sharing. Real families share. Scarlett, we pool our resources to push the strongest swimmer to the shore, and then they pull the rest of us up. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She truly believed this. In her mind, the Harris family was a single organism, and Noah was the heart. I was just a limb, expendable if it meant saving the vital organs. And what if I say no? I asked. What if I tear this up right now? Lucas let out a short, derisive laugh. Then you are proving exactly what I have always said about you. You are jealous. Jealous? I asked, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. You have always been jealous of him, Lucas said, leaning forward. Even when he was a baby, you hated that he was the first grandchild. You hated that he was special. You are hoarding this money not because you care so much about Emma's college. She is 10, for God's sake. She does not even know what college is. You are hoarding it to have power over us. You want to be the one with the checkbook for once. I am hoarding it because I earned it. I said, my voice rising. I drove a car with no heat for 2 winters, so I could max out that contribution. Where were you then? Lucas? You were leasing BMWs and going on ski trips. I was building a network, Lucas shouted. I was investing in my career, which is why I am a vice president and you are still a mid-level analyst. You never had the grit. Scarlett, you never had the vision. You played it safe, small, and boring, and now you want to punish Noah because he has the potential you never had. The words hit me like physical blows. Small, boring, lacking grit. It was the script they had been reading to me my whole life. I have plenty of grit, I said, my voice deadly quiet. You have no idea what it takes to raise a child alone in this city on a single income. You have no idea what I have sacrificed. My father sighed. A long, disappointed exhalation through his nose. We are not discounting your struggles. Scarlett, he said, but this is about utility. That $80,000 sits in an account doing nothing for 8 years, in Noah's hands, right now. It could change the trajectory of this family. It could produce a Nobel Prize winner, a CEO, someone who changes the world. And Emma? I asked. What is she allowed to be? She will be fine, my father said dismissively. She is a girl who knows how to work. She will get by. I stood up. The chair legs screeched against the linoleum. I am not signing this. I said, I am not giving you a dime. My mother burst into tears. It was a sudden, jagged sound. You are breaking my heart, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I tried so hard to raise you to be generous, to be a good sister. And now you are tearing this family apart over money. I am not the one tearing it apart. Mom, I said, grabbing my purse. You are the ones counting another person's money before you have even asked for it. Lucas stood up too, blocking my path to the hallway. He was bigger than me, broader, and for a second, I felt a flicker of genuine physical intimidation. You are making a mistake, he said. A big one. If you walk out of here, you are on your own. No more Sunday dinners. No more safety net. Safety net? I laughed, and it sounded hysterical even to my own ears. What safety net? When have you ever caught me? Lucas? When? We have always been there. My father roared, slamming his hand on the table. We put a roof over your head. We helped you when you were starting out. You mean when I paid rent to live in my old bedroom after college? I asked. When I bought my own groceries? I mean when we managed your financial reputation, he shouted. The room went silent. The echo of his shout hung in the air. What? I asked. My father looked at Lucas, then at my mother. He seemed to deflate slightly, realizing he had said something he hadn't meant to say. What did you say? I repeated. Charles, Don't, my mother whispered. My father straightened his tie. He looked at me with a strange mixture of defiance and defensiveness. Years ago, he said, his voice controlled again. When Lucas was in his final year of undergrad, the tuition gap was significant. We were tapped out. We had a liquidity problem. And? I pushed. And your credit score was excellent, he said. You were fresh out of school. You had no debt because you had worked. So, I opened a card. In your name, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. You opened a credit card in my name? I whispered, without telling me. It was a bridge, he said quickly, just to cover Lucas's final semester and his living expenses while he looked for a job. We intended to pay it off immediately, but the job market was tough that year. It took longer than we thought. How much? I asked. 15,000, Lucas said, looking at the floor. It was 15,000. And we paid it, my father insisted. Eventually, we paid every cent. It was a victimless crime. Scarlett, it was necessary. We had to protect Lucas's degree. If he had dropped out, everything would have been for nothing. I stared at them. I felt like I was looking at strangers. That is why I couldn't get an apartment, I said, the realization washing over me like ice water. When I was 23, I got denied for 3 different apartments. The landlord said there were inconsistencies in my report. I thought it was a mistake. I thought I had just made a filing error. It was a few missed payments. My father shrugged. We were juggling a lot. It was temporary. Your score recovered. You're fine now. You committed identity theft. I said, my own father. We did what we had to do for the family, my mother cried out, lifting her tear-stained face. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? It was 10 years ago. And did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. There was no need. My father said, it was resolved. I looked at Lucas. Did you know? Lucas crossed his arms. I knew Dad handled it. I didn't ask details. I was focusing on graduating. You knew. I said, I looked down at the capital reallocation agreement still sitting on the table. This isn't a request, I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like clarity. This is a pattern. You do not see me as a person. You see me as a resource. A spare battery you can drain whenever the golden boy needs a charge. Scarlett, you are blowing this out of proportion. My father started. I am leaving. I said, do not contact me. Do not call Emma. I walked past Lucas. He didn't move to stop me this time. I think he saw something in my face that scared him. As I reached the door, my mother's voice followed me, shrill and desperate. If you walk out that door, Scarlett, you are choosing money over your own flesh and blood. I opened the door. No, Mom, I said without looking back. I am choosing my daughter over yours. I drove home in silence. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the wheel at 10 and 2 just to keep the car in the lane. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. When I got to my apartment, I didn't even take off my coat. I threw my purse on the couch and opened my laptop. I had never checked my full detailed credit history. I checked my score on the banking app, sure, but I had never pulled the raw reports from the bureaus. I had always trusted that if I paid my bills, the system worked. I went to the annual credit report site. I typed in my social security number, my address, my date of birth. My fingers flew across the keys. Verify your identity. I answered the security questions. Which of the following car loans is yours? None. Which of the following addresses have you lived at? 422 Maple Street. In what year did you open a Chase Slate Visa ending in 4491? I froze. I had never had a Chase Slate Visa. I selected the year, 2014. The report generated. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the lines of data until I found it. Chase Bank USA. Opened August 2014. Credit limit, $20,000. High balance, $19,850. I clicked on the payment history. 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, a sea of red flags in late 2015. Account closed by credit grantor. Paid in full, 2017. There it was. In black and white. My father had maxed out a card in my name, stopped paying it when money got tight, ruined my credit for 2 years, and then quietly paid it off when Lucas finally got his first bonus, wiping the slate clean, except for the history that stayed on my report for 7 years. I remembered 2015. I was pregnant with Emma. I was alone because her father had bailed. I was trying to find a bigger apartment because my studio was too small for a baby. I remembered the rejection letters. I remembered crying in the leasing office of a complex in West Brookridge, begging the manager to tell me why I was high risk. "It's just the algorithm, ma'am," she had said. It wasn't the algorithm. It was my father. It was Lucas's final semester. It was the Harris family legacy. I slammed the laptop shut. I felt sick, physically, violently ill. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet, my body trying to expel the toxicity of the realization. They had not just asked for the money tonight. They had felt entitled to it because they had always felt entitled to me. I was not a daughter. I was an insurance policy. The next morning, I couldn't go to work. I called in sick, my voice rasping. I dropped Emma at school, hugging her a little too tight, a little too long. "Mom, you are squishing me." She laughed, wiggling away. "Have a good day." I said, "learn lots." I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office, the one where I knew my friend Angela would be stopping before her shift. Angela worked in HR at Lumapath. She was 50, divorced, cynical, and the smartest person I knew. I sat in the back corner, wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast. When Angela walked in, she spotted me immediately. She took one look at my face, ordered 2 large black coffees, and sat down opposite me. "Who do I need to kill?" she asked. I took off the sunglasses. My eyes were puffy. "My parents," I said. Angela nodded slowly. "Okay. Metaphorically or literally?" "Because I know a guy for one, but the other requires a shovel." I told her everything. I told her about Sunday dinner. I told her about the proposal. I told her about the credit card. I told her about the capital reallocation agreement. When I finished, Angela sat back in her chair. She didn't look shocked. She looked furious. "That is financial abuse." "Scarlett," she said, her voice low and hard, "that is straight-up fraud. You could have your father arrested." "I cannot arrest my father," I whispered. "Why not?" "He stole from you. He endangered your housing while you were pregnant. That is not a father." "Honey, that is a parasite in a polo shirt." I wiped my eyes with a napkin. I feel so stupid. I trusted them. I thought they were just hard on me. I didn't know they were using me. Predators rely on trust. Angela said, "Especially the ones related to you. But listen to me carefully. They are not done." "What do you mean?" "They showed you their hand," she said. "They are desperate. People who draft fake contracts and guilt-trip you about family duty do not just take no for an answer. They think that money belongs to them. In their heads, they have already spent it on the golden child's tuition." She leaned across the table. "You need to lock it down. Scarlett, today, you need to move that money where they cannot see it, cannot touch it, and cannot guilt you into signing it over. And you need to check everything else. Do they have your social security number? Of course. Do they have access to your bank accounts? Were you on a joint account with them when you were younger? I think my checking account is still linked to the one I had in high school. I never changed it because it was just easier for transfers." Angela looked at me like I was a bomb technician cutting the wrong wire. "Go to the bank," she commanded. "Right now. Close everything. Open new accounts at a completely different institution. Password, protect everything with a code that isn't your birthday or Emma's birthday, but the 529 plan." I said, "They cannot access that without my signature. Do not underestimate entitled people with a deadline." Angela said, "If they could forge a credit card application, they can forge a withdrawal slip, or they can wear you down until you sign it just to make the screaming stop. Remove the temptation." She reached out and squeezed my hand. You are the only thing standing between Emma and the world. Scarlett, be a wall. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to Horizon State Bank. It was a smaller regional bank, one my parents didn't use. They were Bank of America people. Big, national, prestigious. Horizon was local and unpretentious. I sat in the cubicle with a young banker named David. He wore a tie that was slightly too wide and looked eager to help. I need to open a new 529 plan, I said, and I need to roll over funds from an existing plan. Today, of course, David said, typing on his keyboard. We can initiate the transfer electronically. It usually takes 3 to 5 business days. I need it to be as secure as possible. I said, 2-factor authentication, verbal passwords for phone inquiries. I want it so locked down that even I have trouble getting into it. David stopped typing. He looked at me, seeing the tremor in my hands. Is there a specific concern? Ms. Harris? Identity theft. I said, familial. He nodded once, briskly. Understood. We can set up a verbal passphrase. If anyone calls claiming to be you, or claiming to have power of attorney, they have to know the phrase. If they do not, we freeze the account and call you on your cell immediately. Do it, I said. We went through the paperwork. I signed my name so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. When we got to the beneficiary section, I stared at the line. Beneficiary. Emma Harris. I want to add a successor account owner. I said. Okay, David said. Who would you like to list? In case something happens to you. I paused. If I died, my parents would be Emma's next of kin. They would get custody. They would get control of the assets. They would drain this account for Noah before my body was cold. I cannot list my parents. I said, do you have a sibling? No. I said quickly, absolutely not. I thought of Angela. I thought of her fierceness. Can I name a non-relative? Yes, absolutely. Angela Miller. I said, I would have to ask her formally. But I knew she would do it. She would guard that money with a flamethrower. David finalized the transfer request. Okay. Ms. Harris, the request is sent. The funds should move from your current provider to us by early next week. Once they are here, they are under the Horizon shield. I walked out of the bank into the bright midday sun. I felt lighter, but also hollowed out. I had just severed the financial artery that connected me to my family. I had admitted, legally and logistically, that my parents were my enemies. I sat in my car and looked at the receipt in my hand. Transfer amount, $79,842.16. It was done. I had drawn the line. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. We are all just very emotional right now. Please do not do anything rash. We love you. Let's talk this weekend. I stared at the words. We love you. It was a lie. They loved what I could provide. They loved my compliance. I deleted the text. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled to Mom, Dad, and Lucas, and changed their ringtones to silent. I started the car. The heat shield rattled. Loud and ugly. But for the first time, I didn't mind the noise. It sounded like something holding on. Despite the vibration, it sounded like me. The silence from my family was not empty. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. After I moved Emma's college fund to Horizon State Bank, the furious texts from Lucas and the guilt-laden voicemails from my mother abruptly stopped. In their place came a cold, jagged quiet. For 3 weeks, my phone did not ring. When I finally received a text from my mother, it was devoid of emojis, devoid of warmth, devoid of the passive-aggressive affection she usually weaponized. Aunt Linda is asking for your address for her holiday card list. Please send it. That was it. No, how are you? No, how is Emma? No, we miss you. It was transactional. I was no longer a daughter. I was an administrative task. Then came the barbecue. It was the first Saturday of June, a day that blistered with heat and humidity. Usually, this was the date of the annual Harris family kickoff, a tradition my father insisted on to mark the beginning of summer. I kept waiting for the invite, checking my email, checking my spam folder, checking the group chat that had been silent for weeks. It never came. Instead, I saw it on social media. My cousin, who lived 3 towns over and likely had no idea about the schism, posted a photo album titled Summer Fun with the Fam. I sat in my non-air-conditioned living room, scrolling through the pictures on my phone while Emma watched cartoons. There was my father, wearing his grill master apron, holding a spatula like a scepter. There was my mother, laughing with a glass of white wine, her arm draped around Lucas. And there was Noah, wearing a t-shirt that said Sterling Ridge Class of 2032, standing in front of a banner that read, "Congratulations to our genius." They were all there, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. They were eating the potato salad I usually made. They were drinking the iced tea I usually brewed. I zoomed in on the banner. Our genius. It stung, a physical ache in the center of my chest. It wasn't just that I was excluded, it was that I had been erased. By refusing to sacrifice my daughter's future for their golden boy, I had forfeited my seat at the table. I was the defector. Emma looked up from the TV. "Mom, are we going to Grandma's house for the barbecue this year?" I froze, my thumb hovering over a picture of Lucas clinking beers with our uncle. "Not this year, baby," I said, keeping my voice level. "Grandma and Grandpa are very busy getting Noah ready for his new school. It is a big grown-up party." "Oh," she said, turning back to the screen. "That is okay. It is too hot outside anyway." She was resilient, just like my father had said, but he had meant it as an excuse to neglect her. I took it as a testament to her strength. But as I looked at that photo again, at the smug satisfaction on Lucas's face, I realized that resilience shouldn't be the only inheritance I gave her. 2 days later, the email arrived. It was sent from my father's personal account to a massive distribution list that included family, friends, neighbors, and even a few of his old business contacts. I was blind copied, a ghost in the machine. Subject: The Future of the Harris Legacy. I opened it at my desk at Lumapath, hiding the screen from my cubicle neighbor. Dear friends and family, Diane and I are overjoyed to announce that our grandson, Noah Harris, has been officially enrolled at the prestigious Sterling Ridge Institute. As many of you know, Noah has been testing in the top percentile since he was a toddler. We have always known he was destined for great things. Sending a child to an institution of this caliber requires significant investment, but as I have always told my children, you cannot put a price on the future. Some of us understand that sacrifice is the duty of the older generation to the younger. We are proud to do whatever it takes to ensure the Harris name is associated with excellence. We look forward to updating you on his progress as he begins this journey. Sincerely, Charles and Diane. I read the line again. Some of us understand that sacrifice is the duty. It was a public shaming masquerading as a celebration. It was a precise, surgical strike aimed directly at me, hidden in a paragraph about family values. He was telling the world that he was the benevolent patriarch making sacrifices, while implying to anyone who knew the private drama that I was the one who didn't understand duty. I deleted the email, then I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face until my skin was numb. When I returned to my desk, my boss, Mike, was waiting for me. Mike was a nice enough guy, but he was a company man who spoke in buzzwords and hated conflict. "Scarlett, got a minute?" he asked, leaning against the partition. "Sure, Mike." We walked into a glass-walled conference room. He didn't sit down. "So, you know corporate has been looking at the org chart," he said, avoiding eye contact. "We are doing some restructuring to optimize our agility." My stomach dropped. "Am I being let go?" No, Mike said quickly. "Nothing like that. You are a solid performer. Scarlett, consistent. But we are consolidating the senior analyst roles. We need someone who can really dedicate themselves to the new predictive modeling project. It is going to mean late nights, weekends, a lot of travel to the satellite office in Chicago." I nodded slowly. "I can handle the work. Mike, my numbers are the best in the team." "I know," Mike said. "But, well, We know you have Emma. You have hard stops at 5:30 for daycare pickup. You have school events. I have hard stops, but I log back on at night. I argued. I get the work done. We just need more flexibility. Mike said, "We are going to move Justin into the senior lead role." Justin? I asked. Justin was 24. He had been with the company for 18 months. I had taught him how to use the pivot tables he now used to impress management. He has the bandwidth, Mike said, shrugging apologetically. He can fly out on an hour's notice. It is just the reality of the business needs right now. We are keeping you at your current level. Same pay, same title. But Justin will be handling the high-level strategy. I stared at him. It wasn't just the sexism. It was the practical reality of my life being used against me. Because I was a mother, I was capped. Because I had responsibilities outside of these gray walls, I was stagnant. Okay, I said, because I couldn't afford to quit. I couldn't afford to lose the health insurance or the steady paycheck. Not with the legal threats from my family hanging in the air like smoke. Okay, Mike repeated, looking relieved. Thanks for being a team player. Scarlett, I walked back to my desk, watching Justin high-five another guy near the water cooler. He didn't have a mortgage. He didn't have a child. He didn't have a family trying to cannibalize his savings. I sat down and looked at my budget spreadsheet. With inflation rising and my rent likely to go up in the fall, my salary was effectively shrinking. The raise I had been so proud of was barely covering the cost of groceries. I needed more money, and I needed it in a way that didn't require me to sell my soul to Lumapath or my parents. I started freelancing the next week. I found a gig on a local job board for a company called Beacon Prep. It was a small tutoring center in downtown Brookridge that focused on helping public school kids get their grades up for college applications. They needed someone to run their social media and design some flyers. The owner was a harried, kind-hearted woman named Sarah, who paid me $25 an hour. It wasn't much, but I could do the work after Emma went to bed. I started spending my Saturday mornings at the center, taking photos for their Instagram and interviewing students for testimonials. It was there, amidst the smell of dry erase markers and cheap coffee, that I saw the other side of the coin. If my nephew Noah was the anointed prince of academia, these kids were the foot soldiers fighting for every inch of ground. I met kids who worked 30 hours a week at fast food joints to help their parents pay rent. Then came to tutoring until 9 at night. I met kids who shared textbooks because they couldn't afford to buy their own. One rainy Saturday, I was sitting in the waiting area, editing a video on my laptop. A girl named Maya was sitting across from me. She was 18, brilliant, and wanted to be a nurse. She had been accepted to the local community college program, but she looked devastated. "Are you okay?" I asked, lowering my screen. Maya wiped her eyes quickly. "Yeah, it is just, I got the tuition bill." "I thought financial aid covered it?" I asked. "Most of it," she said, "but there is a gap. $400 for the mandatory lab fees and the uniform. Financial aid does not cover fees." $400? I asked. "It might as well be $1 million, she whispered. "My mom is out of work right now. I have $50 saved. If I do not pay the fees by Friday, they drop me from the program. I lose my spot." I stared at her. $400. It was less than what my brother Lucas spent on a weekend golf trip. It was a fraction of what my parents were demanding for Noah's private school blazer. And for Maya, it was the difference between becoming a nurse and staying in minimum wage limbo. I wanted to open my wallet and give it to her. I had the money in my emergency fund, but Sarah, the owner, walked in just then. "Good news." "Maya," Sarah beamed. "I called the pastor at St. Jude's. The church is going to cover the fees. You are in." Maya burst into tears. "Thank you." "Oh my God, thank you." I watched them hug, and something clicked in my brain. It was a sharp, distinct snap, like a puzzle piece locking into place. The system wasn't just broken, it was inefficient. There were people who had $400, people like me, people like my neighbors, who would happily give it if they knew exactly where it was going. But the big scholarships were all about grades and essays and committees. They were designed for the Noahs of the world. Who was looking out for the Mayas? That evening, I was wrestling with 2 bags of groceries in the hallway of my apartment building. The handle of one bag snapped, sending a carton of milk and a dozen apples rolling across the dusty carpet. "Damn it," I hissed, dropping to my knees. "Need a hand?" I looked up. Jonah Reed was standing in the doorway of apartment 2C. Jonah was about my age, maybe a year or 2 older. He had messy brown hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and he was almost always wearing a hoodie that said GitHub or Stack Overflow. We had exchanged pleasantries by the mailboxes for 2 years, but I knew very little about him other than that he worked in tech and didn't play loud music. "Hi, Jonah," I said, scrambling after an apple. "Yeah, a hand would be great." He knelt down and helped me gather the fruit. He didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't try to flirt. He just efficiently rebagged the groceries. "Rough day?" he asked, handing me the milk. "Rough month?" I admitted. Standing up. "Thanks." He nodded. "I saw you working on those flyers in the lobby the other day. For the tutoring center?" "Yeah," I said, my side hustle. "Trying to keep the college fund alive." He smiled. A crooked, genuine expression. "The hustle is real. I am a freelancer too. Full-stack engineer." I paused, my key halfway to my lock. "Wait, you build websites?" "I build platforms," he said. "Apps, backends, databases." "Why? You have the next billion-dollar idea?" I laughed. A tired, dry sound. "No, just a small idea. A $400 idea." He leaned against his doorframe, looking interested. "Tell me." I told him about Maya. I told him about the lab fees. I told him about how stupid it was that a student's future could collapse over a sum of money that most people spent on coffee in a few months. "It is a matching problem," Jonah said immediately. His eyes lit up behind his glasses. "You have supply, donors, and you have demand, students with specific, low-cost needs, but there is no marketplace." "Exactly." I said, "Scholarship sites are too clunky. GoFundMe is too broad. We need something hyper-specific, like Amazon for education gaps." Jonah tapped his chin. "You would need verification. You cannot just let people post, 'I need cash.' That is a scam magnet." "Right," I said, the adrenaline starting to pump through my veins. "The tutoring centers could verify them. Beacon Prep knows these kids. They see the tuition bills. They could be the trusted nodes." Jonah looked at me. He looked at the grocery bags in my hand. Then he looked at his watch. "I was just about to order Thai food." He said, "Do you like Pad CU?" "I love Pad CU." I said, "Come over in 20 minutes." He said, "Bring the kid. Let's map this out." That night, my kitchen table transformed into a war room. Emma sat at one end, happily eating chicken satay and doing her math homework. Jonah and I sat at the other, surrounded by napkins covered in scribbles. Jonah was brilliant. He wasn't a genius in the way my parents described Noah. He didn't broadcast his intelligence or demand you admire it. He just used it. He listened to my rambling thoughts and translated them into structural realities. "So, the user flow is simple," Jonah said. Sketching a box on a napkin. "Student creates profile. Verified partner, that is your Beacon Prep, approves the request. Request goes live. Donor clicks fund. Money goes to the institution, not the student. Direct payment." I said, nodding. "That solves the trust issue. If I give $50 for a textbook." "I want to know it bought a textbook, not beer." "Exactly," Jonah said. "We call them micro-scholarships. Bright Nest." I said suddenly. Jonah paused. "What? The name?" I said, "Bright Nest. Like nurturing a future, building a safe place to grow." "I like it," Jonah said. Writing it down in block letters. Bright Nest. Emma looked up from her homework. "Can I draw the logo?" I smiled at her. "Go for it, baby." As I watched them, my daughter sketching a bird in a nest, my neighbor outlining database schemas, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. It wasn't about getting rich. I didn't think this would make money. I thought it would fix a tiny, broken corner of the world. I thought it would be a way to scream back at my parents without opening my mouth. They believed resources should be hoarded for the elite. I was going to prove that resources should be scattered to the wind to help everyone fly. The next week was a blur of work, parenting, and late-night sessions with Jonah. We fell into a rhythm. I handled the business logic, the branding, and the partnerships with Beacon Prep. Jonah wrote the code. I needed to set up a business bank account for the LLC we were forming. I went back to Horizon State Bank, feeling like a regular. While the banker processed the application, she frowned at her screen. "Ms. Harris, I am seeing a flag on your identity verification." My heart stopped. "What kind of flag? It looks like an address discrepancy." She said, "There is a secured personal loan that was taken out 3 years ago. It is listed under your Social Security number, but the billing address is 422 Maple Street, Ridgefield Heights?" The room seemed to tilt. 422 Maple Street, my parents' house. 3 years ago? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," the banker said. "It is a small loan, $5,000, collateralized by a vehicle, a 2018 Toyota Camry." I closed my eyes. A 2018 Toyota Camry. That was the car Lucas's wife, Jenna, drove. They had done it again. It wasn't just the credit card from 10 years ago. They had used my credit to co-sign or secure a loan for Jenna's car, likely forging my signature on the digital paperwork. They had kept it hidden, probably paying the minimums so I would never get a collection call. Why? Because Lucas's credit was leveraged to the hilt with his lifestyle, because my father didn't want to carry more debt. So they used the spare battery. They used me. "Is the loan current?" I asked, forcing my eyes open. "It is," the banker said, "but it is there. It impacts your debt-to-income ratio." I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Ridgefield Heights and burn the house down. But then I looked at the paperwork for Brightnest sitting on the desk. If I confronted them now, it would be a messy war. They would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would say I agreed to it during a family dinner I had forgotten. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't an isolated incident of desperation back when I was 22. It was a system. It was their operating model. I was the financial host body they leached off of whenever their ambitions outstripped their wallets. "I need to file a dispute," I said to the banker, "but not today. Today. Just open the business account." I walked out of the bank with a cold, hard resolve in my gut. I wasn't just going to protect Emma's money. I was going to build something they could never touch. I was going to build something that stood for everything they weren't. They used money to control. I would use money to liberate. They bet on the gifted one. I would bet on the forgotten ones. I went straight to Jonah's apartment. He was coding, wearing headphones. I tapped on his shoulder. "We need to launch," I said. He took off his headphones. "We are still in beta. The UI is clunky. I do not care," I said. "We launch with what we have. I want this live. I want to fund the first student by the end of the month." Jonah looked at me, seeing the fire in my eyes. He didn't ask what happened. He just nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's ship it." I went back to my apartment and looked at Emma, who was sleeping in her room. I kissed her forehead. My parents had demanded I sacrifice her future. They had stolen my credit. They had tried to break me. But they had made a fatal error. They thought I was just a single mom, a mid-level employee, a resilient girl who would take the hit and keep moving. They didn't know I was an architect, and I was done building their castle. I was starting on my own. The launch of Brightnest was not marked by a gala or a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It happened on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, in the quiet hum of my living room, while the smell of leftover Thai food still lingered in the air. Jonah sat on my couch with his laptop balanced on his knees, and I sat at the dining table, staring at the admin dashboard we had spent the last 3 weeks building. "Ready?" Jonah asked, looking up over the rim of his glasses. I took a deep breath. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I thought about Maya and her $400 tuition gap. I thought about the credit card my father had opened in my name. I thought about the word sacrifice in my father's email. "Let's do it," I said. I clicked publish. There was no confetti on the screen, just a small status indicator turning from red to green. Brightnest is live. The site was simple, bare bones, really, a clean white background, a navy blue navigation bar, and 3 active campaigns we had vetted through Beacon Prep. There was Kevin, a high school junior who needed $600 for a refurbished laptop so he could take AP Computer Science. There was Sarah, a chemistry student who needed $300 for lab fees. And there was Marcus, who needed $150 for a graphing calculator. It felt small, in the grand scheme of venture capital and billion-dollar valuations. Asking for $1,000 total seemed almost quaint, but to me, looking at those 3 faces, it felt like a revolution. We toasted with lukewarm, sparkling water. To the overlooked, I said, raising my glass. To the micro, Jonah replied, clinking his glass against mine. The silence that followed the launch was deafening. I had expected something, maybe not a flood, but a trickle. I had expected that if we built it, they would come. But the internet is a vast, noisy ocean, and Brightnest was a message in a bottle floating in the middle of a hurricane. For the first week, the traffic counter barely moved. We had 12 unique visitors. 4 of them were me checking from different devices. 3 were Jonah. 2 were Sarah from Beacon Prep. I went into overdrive. I treated Brightnest like a second full-time job. On my lunch breaks at LumaPath, I hid in the stairwell and posted on community Facebook groups. Do you want to help a local student today? $5 makes a difference. I emailed the link to everyone in my contact list, except my family. I printed flyers on the office printer when no one was looking and pinned them to bulletin boards in coffee shops, libraries, and laundromats. I felt a creeping, cold dread in my stomach. Lucas's voice echoed in my head. You never had the vision. You play it safe, small, and boring. Was this small? Was this just a hobby project that would fizzle out? Proving them right? By Friday of the second week, we had raised $50 total. I sat at my kitchen table, head in my hands, while Emma colored next to me. Is the website broken? Emma asked, not looking up from her drawing of a dragon. No, baby, I said, my voice muffled by my hands. It works. People just do not know about it yet. Maybe you should tell Grandpa, she suggested innocently. He knows lots of people. I lifted my head and looked at her. Her sweetness was a knife twist. Grandpa is busy. I said, we are going to do this ourselves. The breakthrough didn't come from my marketing efforts. It came from gratitude. One of our beta testers, a nursing student named Talia, whom we had manually funded with money from my own pocket just to test the system, posted on her Instagram. It wasn't a polished influencer post. It was a selfie of her in her scrubs, holding a heavy anatomy textbook, her eyes red from crying happy tears. The caption read, I was going to drop Anatomy 201 because I could not afford the book or the access code. I was literally filling out the withdrawal paperwork when I got the email. A stranger paid for it. A total stranger on this new site called Brightnest just bought my future for me. I am going to be a nurse. I am going to save lives. Thank you. She tagged us. A reporter for Cityline Weekly, a local independent paper in Brookridge, followed Talia. Her name was Elena. She saw the post, clicked the tag, and sent an email to the generic info@brightnest.com address. I checked every 5 minutes. Subject: interview request. Micro scholarship story. I called her back within 30 seconds. We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Elena was sharp, cynical, and tired of writing fluff pieces about new bakeries. She listened as I explained the premise. Not charity, but investment. Not vague donations, but specific tools for specific hurdles. I told her about the gap. I told her about how the system was designed to filter people out, not keep them in. I didn't mention my family, but the anger that fueled me must have bled into my voice, because Elena stopped taking notes and just watched me. This is personal for you, she noted. It is pragmatic. I corrected. We are wasting talent. We are letting engineers and nurses and teachers drop out over sums of money that people spend on dinner. It is bad economics. The article ran 2 days later. The headline was better than anything I could have written. Micro scholarships. Major impact. How 2 locals are fixing the education gap. 1 textbook at a time. It went semi-viral. It got picked up by the regional aggregator. Then it got shared on LinkedIn by a local university dean. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about quarterly projections. When my phone vibrated, then it vibrated again. Then it started buzzing continuously. A swarm of bees in my pocket. I slid it out under the table. New donation. $20, $50, $100. New student profile submitted. I looked up at Justin, who was droning on about synergy. I smiled. It was a feral, secret smile. By the time I got home that night, Kevin's laptop was fully funded, Sarah's lab fees were paid, Marcus had his calculator, and we had 40 new student profiles waiting in the queue. The next month was a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. Brightnest was growing, but the infrastructure was just me and Jonah. Jonah handled the server load. Patching holes in the code as traffic spiked, I handled the humans. Every student profile had to be verified. I refused to let Brightnest become a scam haven. That meant I had to call the schools, email the guidance counselors, and review the tuition bills. I worked at LumaPath from 9 to 5. I picked up Emma. We did dinner, and then, from 8 in the evening until 2 in the morning, I was the CEO, the compliance officer, and the customer support agent of Brightnest. My apartment became a command center. Stacks of verification paperwork covered the coffee table. One Tuesday night, I was deep in a verification call with a registrar's office in Ohio. Trying to confirm a student's enrollment status, Emma was sitting on the rug, tugging at my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered. "Mom, look, not now." I whispered back, covering the microphone. "Mommy is working." She shrank back, her face falling. She went back to her room without a word. When I finally hung up, I walked into her room. She was asleep, clutching her sketchbook. I opened it to the page she had been working on. It was a drawing of me. In the drawing, I was sitting at a computer, and there were red lines coming out of my head like steam. Emma was drawn in the corner, tiny and gray. The caption, in her wobbly handwriting, read, "Mom is busy saving the world." I sat on the edge of her bed and cried. I was doing this for her future, but in the process, I was becoming the very thing I hated, a parent who prioritized success over presence. My parents had ignored me to worship Noah's potential. Was I ignoring Emma to worship Brightnest's mission? The next morning, I made a new rule. I called a team meeting, just me and Jonah. "No work on Friday nights," I said, "and no work on Sunday mornings until noon." Jonah looked at the backlog of tickets. "Scarlett, we are drowning. If we do not verify these kids, the donors lose interest. Then we drown for a few hours." I said firmly, "I am not building a platform to save kids if I lose my own daughter in the process." We stuck to it. Friday nights became sacred. We ordered pizza. We built forts. We watched movies. I put my phone in a drawer. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and messy kitchens. It slowed our growth slightly. Our response times went from instant to 24 hours. But when I looked at Emma, I saw the color coming back into her cheeks. I saw the trust returning. The article did more than bring in donors. It brought in the sharks. Investors started sliding into my LinkedIn DMs. "Love the hustle. Let's chat." "Interesting play. Have you considered monetization?" I took the meetings. I used my lunch breaks, my sick days. I sat in sleek glass offices downtown, pitching my heart out to men in fleece vests who looked at me like I was a pitiable curiosity. One venture capitalist, a man named Brad who kept checking his Apple Watch, cut me off 5 minutes into my slide deck. "Look, Scarlett," he said, leaning back, "it is a cute story. Single mom, crusade for justice. It plays well in the press. But can you handle the grind? Startups are a 24/7 game. You have a kid. Who watches her when you need to fly to San Francisco? I have a support system. I lied. He shook his head. Honestly, you need a co-founder. A strong male lead to handle the operations while you do the emotional stuff. The heartstrings marketing. I packed up my laptop. Thank you for your time. Brad, I said, but I am not the marketing intern. I am the CEO. I walked out, shaking with rage. A strong male lead. Like my father? Like Lucas? I was ready to give up on funding. We would bootstrap. We would grow slow. Then I met Maya Caldwell. Maya was a legend in the regional angel investor scene. She had made her fortune in logistics, unsexy and gritty. She was 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. We met at a diner, not a glass office. She ordered coffee and pie. Show me the retention numbers, she said. I opened my laptop. I didn't show her the sob stories. I showed her the data. Donor repeat rate is 40%. I said, that is double the industry average for crowdfunding. Once people fund one student and get that thank you note, they come back. They feel effective. It is dopamine. Maya looked at the spreadsheet. She traced the lines with a manicured finger. You are verifying these manually? She asked. Yes, I said. That is your bottleneck, she said. You need to automate the verification with API integrations to the schools. You need tech. I know. I said, my CTO, my co-founder, is building it, but we need capital to pay for the server costs and to quit our day jobs so we can build it faster. Maya looked at me. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes. You are a single mother? She asked. I braced myself for the lecture. Yes. Good, Maya said. I blinked. Good? Mothers know how to maximize resources, she said. Taking a sip of coffee. You know the value of $1. You do not have an ego about burning cash to look cool. You just want the job done. She pulled a checkbook out of her purse. I am in, she said. $250,000, convertible note. But one condition. I held my breath. What? You quit the marketing job, she said. Today, you cannot serve two masters. If I am betting on you, I want all of you. I looked at the check. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place. It was freedom, and it was terror. Deal. I said, giving notice at LumaPath was the most terrifying gratification of my life. Mike looked shocked. Justin looked smug. Assuming I had failed, I didn't tell them where I was going. I just said I was moving on to a new opportunity. Jonah quit his job the same day. We needed an office. We couldn't work out of my apartment anymore. It wasn't fair to Emma, and we needed space to whiteboard. We found a sublet in the historic district downtown. It was on the second floor of a red brick building that had seen better days. The previous tenant had been a hair salon. The space was small, maybe 400 square feet, and the floors were stained with decades of hair dye, dark circles of brown and red that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The air still smelled faintly of ammonia and cheap floral shampoo. It was perfect. We moved in on a Monday. We bought 2 cheap desks from IKEA and set them up back to back. I put a picture of Emma on my desk. Jonah put a potted succulent on his. We are a real company, Jonah said, spinning in his chair. We are, I said, looking out the grimy window at the street below. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was my mother. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 weeks. I hesitated, then answered. I was the CEO of a venture-backed startup now. I could handle Diane Harris. Hello. Mother, I said. Scarlett. She said. Her voice was brittle. We heard a rumor. Aunt Linda saw something on Facebook. Are you? Did you quit your job? Yes, I said. I am running Bright Nest full-time. There was a long silence on the other end. Oh, Scarlett, she sighed. That little charity website? It is a platform. Mom, I said, and we just closed a seed round of funding. Well, that is. Nice, she said, the word dripping with condescension. But is it wise? Leaving a stable career with benefits? LumaPath was a real company. This sounds like a cute project, something for the PTA. It is a business, I said. gripping the phone. Lucas says the tech market is volatile. She continued, ignoring me. He is worried you are going to crash and burn and come asking for help. And with Noah's tuition. We are very stretched right now. I won't be asking for help. I said, how is Noah? He is thriving, she said, her voice shifting instantly to reverence. He is exhausted. Of course, the curriculum is rigorous. He is up until 1 a.m. studying. But that is the price of greatness. He is on the robotics team. He is learning Mandarin. That sounds like a lot for an 11-year-old. I said, he is not a normal 11-year-old, she snapped. He is special. We are all making sacrifices for him. Lucas and Jenna, well, they have had to tighten their belts. And your father and I. She trailed off. What about you and Dad? I asked. Nothing, she said quickly. We are fine. We are investing in the future. Just do not expect us to bail you out when this charity thing falls through. I am not asking you to. I said, I have investors. Mom, real ones. She laughed, a short, disbelief-filled sound. Well, good luck with that. I hung up. The sting was there. But it was different now. It was duller. It was like pressing on an old bruise rather than receiving a fresh blow. They thought it was cute. They thought it was a hobby. Let them think that. I didn't know the full extent of what investing in the future meant for them until I ran into Jenna, Lucas's wife. At the grocery store a week later, I tried to duck down the cereal aisle, but she spotted me. Jenna looked tired, usually immaculate, with perfect highlights and designer yoga gear. She looked frayed. Her roots were showing. She was buying generic brand pasta. Scarlett, she said, forcing a smile. Long time no see. Hi. Jenna. I said, how are you? Oh, she said, waving a hand vaguely. Busy. Noah is a handful with this new schedule. The commute is 40 minutes each way. I spend half my life in the car. And Lucas? Working like a dog, she said, her voice lowering. The new promotion. It is a lot of pressure. And with the tuition. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. It is $65,000 a year. Scarlett, cash, and then there are the trips, the specialized laptop, the uniforms. We had to take out a private loan to cover the gap this year because the stock options haven't hit yet. The interest rate is insane. I felt a complicated pang of sympathy. Jenna was an enabler, but she was also a victim of the Harris ambition machine. And Mom and Dad? I asked. Jenna sighed. Leaning against her cart. They refinanced the house. I stared at her. They did what? They took a cash-out refinance. She whispered. To help with the second year. They have 30 years on their mortgage again. Scarlett, they are almost 70. I felt a cold chill. My father, who prided himself on financial prudence, who lectured me about debt, had mortgaged his paid-off house to fund a middle schooler's tuition. They are betting everything, I said softly. They are convinced he is the ticket. Jenna said, Lucas says once Noah gets into MIT, he will start a company, go public, and buy us all islands. But until then? She looked at the generic pasta in her cart. We are eating a lot of spaghetti. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw envy in her eyes. Not because I had money, she didn't know about the investment, but because I was out. I had stepped off the treadmill. Well, Jenna said, straightening up, I better go. Noah needs his protein shake before coding camp. Good to see you. Jenna, I said. I watched her walk away. The Harris family was a high-speed train barreling down a track, fueled by debt and delusion. They had thrown my luggage off the train, thinking it would make them go faster. But standing there in the cereal aisle, I realized they were heading for a cliff, and I was the only one building a parachute. I went back to the office. The smell of ammonia was strong that day. Jonah was typing furiously, the click-clack of his mechanical keyboard a steady rhythm. Everything okay? He asked, seeing my face. Yeah, I said, sitting down at my desk and looking at the picture of Emma. I logged into the admin dashboard. We had 300 active campaigns, 300 kids who were getting help without mortgaging their parents' souls. We need to grow faster. I said to Jonah, "Why?" he asked. "Because there are going to be a lot of people needing a safety net soon," I said, "and I want to be ready to catch them." 2 years is a long time in the life of a startup. In the life of a family, however, it is barely a breath. While Brightnest was busy growing from a scrappy idea in a hair dye-stained office into a Series B company with 70 employees and operations in 12 states, the Harris family dynamic remained trapped in amber, preserved in a state of decaying ambition. I stood in my office, a real one this time, with glass walls and a view of the Brook Ridge skyline, and looked at the capitalization table on my screen. It was a spreadsheet that defined my worth. On paper, I was a multimillionaire. My equity in Brightnest, diluted but still significant after our latest funding round led by a major West Coast firm, was valued at numbers that made my head spin. But my checking account was still modest. I paid myself a salary of $110,000 a year. It was comfortable, certainly more than I had made at LumaPath, but it wasn't private jet money, it was buy organic strawberries money. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted Emma, now 12 and navigating the treacherous waters of middle school, to stay grounded. I wanted her to know the value of things. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Jonah, now our Chief Technology Officer, slacking me from 3 offices away. "Podcast link is live. You are trending on Twitter." I sighed and clicked the link. Last week, I had been a guest on the Founders Circle, a popular national business podcast. The host had asked me about the philosophy behind Brightnest, and I had, perhaps, been a little too honest. I scrubbed the audio to the 40-minute mark. "The problem," my voice said through the speakers, sounding sharper and more confident than I felt inside, "is that we treat education like a venture capital fund that only bets on sure things. We pour millions into the kids who already have safety nets, tutors, and zip code advantages, calling them gifted to justify the hoarding. Meanwhile, we let a brilliant kid drop out because he cannot afford a $300 graphing calculator. It is not just unfair, it is bad math. We are over-indexing on the privileged and under-indexing on the hungry." I paused the audio. The clip had been shared 10,000 times. The comments were a mix of, "Finally someone said it," and angry tirades from parents who felt attacked for sending their kids to private schools. I didn't regret saying it. It was the truth, but I knew exactly who would hear it and take it personally. I hadn't seen my parents in 6 months. Our relationship had withered into a dry husk of obligation. I sent cards for birthdays. They sent brief, polite text messages on holidays. But the silence was preferable to the demands. Then came the funeral for Great Aunt Ida. It was neutral ground, a mandatory attendance event. I brought Emma, she was taller now, wearing a black dress and clutching her phone like a shield. We stood near the back of the funeral home, watching the Harris clan circulate. There was Lucas. He looked thinner, his face drawn and gray. The expensive suit he wore seemed to hang on him loosely. Beside him stood Jenna, who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, and there was Noah. My nephew was 13 now. He sat on a folding chair in the corner, staring at his shoes. He wore the blazer of the Sterling Ridge Institute, the crest embroidered in gold on the pocket. It looked less like a uniform and more like a costume he was forced to wear. I nudged Emma. "Go say hi to your cousin." She hesitated, then walked over. I watched from a distance as she sat next to him. Noah looked up, and for a second, the mask of the genius slipped. He looked terrified. I moved closer, pretending to examine a flower arrangement, just close enough to hear. "It sucks," Noah was whispering, picking at a loose thread on his knee. "Everyone there is. They are like robots. If you get an A-, the teachers ask if you are having trouble at home. I sleep like 4 hours a night. Do you have time to draw?" Emma asked gently. "I remember you liked comics." Noah let out a short, bitter laugh. "Draw? I do not have time to eat. My dad says I have to make the robotics varsity team or I won't get the MIT Scouts' attention. I hate robotics. I hate it. Then tell them. Emma said. I can't, Noah whispered, and the despair in his voice broke my heart. They mortgaged the house. Emma, I heard them fighting about it. If I quit, they lose everything. I have to be the genius. I have to. I stepped back, my stomach turning. It was worse than I thought. They hadn't just invested in him. They had leveraged their entire existence on the back of a 13-year-old boy. He wasn't a child to them anymore. He was a penny stock they were desperately trying to pump before the crash. Lucas spotted me then. His eyes narrowed. He said something to Jenna, who looked away, and then he marched toward me. Scarlett, he said. His voice was tight, clipped. Lucas, I said, I am sorry about Aunt Ida. He waved a hand dismissively. She was 90. Listen, we saw the podcast. I stiffened. I was speaking generally. Lucas, it felt specific. He hissed, hoarding resources, betting on the privileged. You were talking about us. I was talking about a systemic issue. I said calmly, if the shoe fits, that is not my problem. You are smug, he said, stepping into my personal space. You think because you got lucky with some charity app that you are better than us. But you do not know what real pressure is. You do not know what it takes to operate at the elite level. I looked at Noah, who was still hunched in the corner. I know what pressure looks like. Lucas, I said quietly, and I know what it looks like when it is crushing a kid. Noah looks sick. He is focused. Lucas snapped. He is an athlete of the mind. You wouldn't understand. He turned on his heel and walked away, but before he did, I saw it. Beneath the anger, beneath the arrogance, there was panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. 2 weeks later, the panic arrived at my doorstep. My assistant, a sharp 22-year-old named Chloe, buzzed my office line. Your parents are here, she said. They do not have an appointment. I froze. They had never come to the office. They had never even acknowledged the address. Send them in, I said, closing the spreadsheet I was working on. Charles and Diane Harris walked into my glass-walled office. They looked out of place among the beanbag chairs and whiteboards of the outer bullpen. My father, usually imposing, looked shrunken. His posture was slumped. My mother was clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said, not standing up. Scarlett, my father said, looking around the room. This is impressive. It is a workspace, I said. Take a seat. They sat. The silence stretched, thin and taut. We need to talk business, my father said finally. I folded my hands on the desk. Okay, we are in a liquidity crunch, he said. He used the financial term to sanitize the reality, just like he always did. The refinance on the house. The terms were variable, the rates adjusted last month, and with Noah's tuition going up, and the travel costs for his competitions. He stopped. He couldn't say the words. We are drowning. Scarlett, my mother blurted out. She looked at me, her eyes wet. We are 3 months behind on the new mortgage. The bank sent a notice of default. If we do not come up with $40,000 by Friday, they start foreclosure proceedings. 40,000. I repeated, and we need another 30 for the tuition balance. Lucas added. I hadn't noticed Lucas standing in the doorway. He walked in, closing the glass door behind him. He looked like a man who had been chasing a train for miles and had finally missed it. $70,000, I said. That is the ask? It is a bridge loan, my father said quickly, just to get us through this semester. Once Lucas's bonus hits in December. Lucas's bonus is always coming in December, I said, but it never seems to arrive. Does it? Scarlett, please, my mother said. This is your childhood home. This is Noah's future. You have done so well. We see the news. We know you are worth millions. I am worth millions on paper. I said, that is equity. It is not cash in a duffel bag. You have a salary? Lucas said aggressively. You have assets. You could write a check for 70 grand today and not miss a meal. I looked at them. The three architects of my insecurity, the people who had stolen my credit, diminished my achievements, and demanded I sacrifice my daughter, and now they stood there, not with an apology, but with a demand disguised as a favor. They thought because I had money, I owed them. They thought my success was communal property, even though my struggle had been solitary. I cannot give you the money, I said. My mother made a sound like she had been slapped. Cannot? Or won't? Lucas sneered. I won't give you cash to set on fire, I said. If I give you $70,000, you will pay the mortgage for 6 months, pay the tuition, and then we will be back here in January. You are living beyond your means to fund a fantasy. It is not a fantasy, my father shouted, slamming his hand on my desk. Noah is a prodigy. Noah is a depressed 13-year-old who wants to draw comics, I shouted back. Standing up, the room went silent. Through the glass walls, I saw my employees looking up from their desks. I lowered my voice. I will not give you a lump sum. I said, but I will not let you lose the house if I can help it, and I won't let Noah get kicked out of school mid-year, even if I hate that school. I took a breath. Here is my offer. I will set up a direct payment to the bank to bring the mortgage current, and I will pay the tuition balance directly to Sterling Ridge. But I am setting up a controlled education trust for Noah. It will be administered by a third party if he wants to stay at Sterling Ridge. The trust pays. If he wants to transfer to public school and get therapy, which he needs, the trust pays for that too. But not a single dime goes to you. Lucas, or to you, Dad, I watched them process this. It was a lifeline. It saved the house. It saved the school year. But it stripped them of control. It made me the steward of Noah's safety, not them. That is insulting. Lucas spat. You want to control my son? I want to protect him. I said, the way no one protected me. You are enjoying this, aren't you? My mother said, her voice trembling with venom. You are enjoying dangling this over us. You think because you are rich now, you are the matriarch? I am not the matriarch, I said. I am the only one with a calculator who knows how to use it. Take the deal or leave it. Lucas stepped forward, his face purple. You promised, he yelled. I blinked. I what? Years ago, he shouted, when Noah was born. You stood in the hospital room and you said, I will never let him fail. You said you would do anything for him. I stared at him. I remembered that day. I remembered holding a tiny, wrinkled baby and marveling at his innocence. I had whispered that I hoped he had a good life. I had never sworn a blood oath to fund his Ivy League track at the expense of my own sanity. That was a sentiment. Lucas, I said, not a contract. You made a verbal agreement, Lucas claimed, his eyes wild. You said you would support the family. You leveraged our family story. The single mom. The struggle. To sell your little app to investors. You built your brand on our backs. And now you want to cut us out? You are delusional. I said, I built this in spite of you. Get out of my office. We are not leaving until you write the check, my father said, crossing his arms. Chloe, I said into the intercom, please call security. The look on my father's face when the uniformed guard walked into the bullpen was something I would never forget. It was the look of a king realizing his crown was made of paper. You will regret this. Scarlet. Lucas spat as the guard ushered them out. You will regret humiliating us. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. I thought the silence was shame. I was wrong. It was strategy. On Thursday morning, a process server walked into the Bright Nest lobby. He handed Chloe a thick envelope. She brought it to me, looking pale. I opened it. State Superior Court, Civil Division, Plaintiff, Lucas Harris. On behalf of Noah Harris, minor. Defendants, Scarlett Harris, Bright Nest Incorporated. I scanned the complaint. My breath caught in my throat. Count 1. Breach of oral contract. Alleging that I had entered into a binding verbal agreement to fund Noah's education in exchange for family support during my early career. Count 2. Unjust enrichment. alleging that I had used the likeness and narrative of the Harris family struggles to market Bright Nest, thereby profiting from their hardship without compensation. Count 3. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, alleging that I had maliciously withheld promised funds, causing severe psychological trauma to the minor child. Noah, it was a work of fiction. It was absurd. No judge would uphold it. But that wasn't the point. The point was the timing. 10 minutes after the process server left, my phone rang. It was Maya Caldwell, my lead investor. "Scarlett," she said, and her voice was grave. "We have a situation." "I know." I said, "My brother just sued me. It is frivolous." "Maya, I can prove it. That is not the only situation," she said. "Check your email." I opened my inbox. There was an email from the CEO of Horizon Path, a massive fintech conglomerate based in New York. We had been in loose talks with them for months about a partnership. Subject: Letter of Intent. Acquisition of Bright Nest Inc. I opened the attachment. I read the number. Purchase price: $500 million. $500 million. My share, even after dilution, would be roughly $200 million. It was generational wealth. It was change the world money. It was, Emma never has to worry about anything ever again money. But then I read the contingencies. Condition 4.2. The company shall be free of any material litigation, claims, or disputes that could adversely affect the reputation, brand, or intellectual property of the acquired entity. I dropped the phone on my desk. Lucas didn't know about the acquisition offer. He couldn't have. But he had inadvertently thrown a grenade into the engine room of the biggest deal of my life. If Horizon Path found out about the lawsuit, a lawsuit alleging that the founder of a scholarship platform was stealing from her own family and refusing to educate her nephew, they would walk. The family values optics were the core of our brand. A public feud would be toxic. I sank into my chair. I was staring at $200 million, and my brother was holding a match, ready to burn it all down for 70 grand. I called my lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Vanessa, whom Maya had recommended. "It is blackmail," I told her. Pacing my office, "It is legal blackmail. He is suing me for things that never happened. It does not matter if it is true." Vanessa said calmly over the speakerphone, "It matters if it is loud. Horizon Path hates noise. If this goes to court, it becomes public record. The press will pick it up. Scholarship queen sued by family for neglect." The headline writes itself. "So what do I do?" I asked. "Pay him? If you pay him now, it looks like an admission of guilt," Vanessa said, "and he will just come back for more. If you settle, you need it to be ironclad. But right now, we have to disclose this to Horizon Path. We have a fiduciary duty, and if we disclose, they might pause the deal." She said, "They might lower the price, or they might walk away entirely." I looked out the window. It was raining. The city looked gray and washed out. I thought about the first day I launched Bright Nest. I thought about the $400 gap. Now the gap was $500 million, and the person standing in the middle of it was my own flesh and blood. "I need a meeting," I said. "With Horizon?" Vanessa asked. "No." I said, "With Lucas. If he wants a war." I need to look him in the eye and see if he actually has the stomach to pull the trigger. I hung up and texted Lucas. "Meet me at the lawyer's office. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He replied instantly. "Bring the checkbook." I stared at the screen. I didn't feel the anger anymore. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was a liability, and I was going to handle him the way a CEO handles a liability. I went home early that night. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Hey, Mom," she said, "you look like you saw a ghost." I kissed the top of her head. "No, baby," I said, "just a vampire." I sat down next to her. I said, "If we had a lot of money, like a really, really lot of money, what would you want to do?" She thought about it, chewing on her pencil. "I would buy Noah a sketchbook," she said, "a really expensive one, and maybe I would buy Grandma a chill pill." I laughed. It was a startled, genuine sound. That sounds like a good investment, I said. I looked at her. She was the only thing that mattered. Not the 500 million, not the reputation. Her. And I realized then that Lucas had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought I was fighting for the money. He thought I was fighting for the deal, but I was fighting for the principle that you do not get to eat your children to feed your ego. He had sued the wrong woman, and tomorrow, he was going to find out exactly what resilience looked like when it was weaponized. The conference room at the law firm of Sterling Associates was silent, save for the hum of the climate control system and the nervous tapping of Jonah's pen against the mahogany table. The view from the 45th floor offered a panoramic sweep of the city, but none of us were looking at the view. We were looking at the speakerphone in the center of the table, a black Polycom device that currently held the fate of a $500 million deal in its electronic circuitry. On the other end of the line was the acquisition team from Horizon Path. We loved the platform. Scarlett, the voice of their lead counsel crackled. The metrics are stellar. The mission aligns perfectly with our ESG goals, but this lawsuit, it is a problem. We are a publicly traded company. We cannot acquire a founder who is being sued for fraud by her own family. The optics are messy. It screams instability. I leaned forward, clasping my hands to stop them from trembling. The lawsuit is baseless, I said, keeping my voice steady. It is a nuisance suit designed to extract a settlement. It has no legal merit. Merit does not matter in the court of public opinion. The counsel replied, if we announce this deal, and the next day a story breaks that you stole your family's savings to build the company, our stock takes a hit. We need this resolved, cleanly, quietly, and permanently, or we walk. The line went dead. I looked at Maya. She was sitting with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. They are bluffing about walking, she said. They want this tech, but they are right about the noise. We need to kill this lawsuit before the due diligence period ends. My personal attorney, Vanessa, opened a thick file folder. She was a woman who wore tailored suits like armor and smiled only when she smelled blood. We have two options, Vanessa said. Option A is we fight. We go to court. We depose your brother. We expose the frivolity of the claims. We win, eventually. But it takes 6 months, maybe a year. And by then, the deal is dead. And option B? I asked. Option B is we nuke them, Vanessa said. She slid a stack of documents across the table toward me. I had my team run a forensic accounting deep dive on your parents and your brother. She said, we looked for everything, and we found a lot. I picked up the first document. It was a copy of a bank statement from 20 years ago. My childhood savings account, the one my grandmother had started for me. It was drained, Vanessa said, pointing to a line item. Transferred to a checking account owned by Charles and Diane Harris on September 12, 2004. $3,000. I frowned. That was the year Lucas crashed his car. My parents told me the savings account had lost value due to market fluctuations. Keep going, Vanessa said. I turned the page. Credit reports, loan applications. Here's a personal loan taken out in your name 4 years ago, Vanessa said. Digital signature. The IP address traces back to your parents' home router. And here's a credit card application for Lucas, where your father listed your income as Lucas's income to boost the credit limit. That is bank fraud. She tapped the stack of papers. This is a pattern of systemic financial abuse. Scarlett, it is not just the one credit card you knew about. They have been using your identity as a financial slush fund for 2 decades. If we hand this to the district attorney, your father goes to prison. Lucas goes to prison. Your mother goes to prison. I stared at the papers. The evidence was black and white. It was irrefutable. I held the power to destroy them completely. I could send the police to the house on Maple Street. I could watch them be led away in handcuffs. It would be justice. But then I thought of Noah. I thought of a 13-year-old boy who was already drowning in pressure, already terrified of disappointing the world. If I sent his father and grandparents to jail, what happened to him? I cannot send them to prison, I said quietly. Maya looked at me. Scarlett, this is business. They are trying to extort you. I know. I said, but Noah is innocent. I will not destroy his life to punish them. Then what do you want to do? Vanessa asked. I looked at the view of the city, at the endless grid of streets where people were living their lives, fighting their battles, trying to keep their heads above water. I want peace, I said, and I want safety. For Emma, for me, and for Noah. I turned back to the table. We are going to settle, I said, but on my terms. The mediation took place 3 days later in a neutral conference room at a downtown dispute resolution center. The atmosphere was toxic from the moment we walked in. Lucas sat on one side of the long table, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he chased ambulances for a living. My parents sat next to him. My father looked old, his skin papery and gray. My mother refused to look at me, staring fixedly at a watermark on the table. Vanessa sat next to me. She placed a single document in the center of the table. This is the settlement agreement, Vanessa said. Lucas's lawyer reached for it. But Lucas snatched it first. He scanned it, and his face turned a violent shade of red. Is this a joke? Lucas demanded. He threw the paper down. You want us to sign a confession? It is an acknowledgement of facts, Vanessa said calmly. Let's go through the terms, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I looked directly at my father. 1, I said, I will establish a dedicated education trust for Noah. It will cover his tuition at Sterling Ridge, or any other school he chooses, through college. It will cover his books, his housing, his therapy, and his living expenses. Lucas snorted. So you are paying. I knew you would fold. I am not finished. I said, the trust will be administered by a third-party fiduciary. You, Lucas, will have no access to the funds. Neither will Mom or Dad. You cannot withdraw a cent. If you try, the trust dissolves and the money goes to a charity. That is my son, Lucas shouted. You cannot lock me out of his finances. I can, and I will, I said, because you have proven you cannot be trusted with them. I turned to my parents. 2, I continued. I am aware that you are facing foreclosure. I am setting up a modest annuity that will pay the mortgage directly to the bank every month. You will not lose your home. You will have a roof over your heads for the rest of your lives. My mother looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Scarlet. However, I said, raising a hand, Condition 3. In exchange for this, you will drop the lawsuit with prejudice. And you will sign this statement. I pointed to the document Lucas had thrown. The statement details the credit card fraud, the forged loans, and the misuse of my identity over the last 20 years. I said, it admits that you have no claim to Emma's college fund, no claim to Bright Nest, and no claim to any future assets I acquire. It is a full release of liability. And if we do not sign? Lucas sneered. Vanessa opened her briefcase. She took out the stack of evidence, the bank statements, the IP logs, the forged applications. She slid them across the table. If you do not sign, Vanessa said, I file these with the court tomorrow morning as part of our defense, and then I forward them to the FBI for an investigation into wire fraud and identity theft. The room went dead silent. My father picked up the papers. His hands shook so hard the pages rattled. He looked at the loan application with his own handwriting on it. This is, he stammered. It is a felony. Dad, I said softly, multiple felonies. Lucas looked at the papers. He looked at me. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by a stark, terrified realization. You would put us in jail? He whispered. I am giving you a choice, I said. You can have the money to save your house and educate your son. Or you can have a prison sentence. But you cannot have my money and your pride. You have to pick one. Lucas slammed his fist on the table. It is humiliating, he yelled. You are making us crawl. I am making you stop, I yelled back, my composure finally cracking. I am making you stop using me. I am making you stop stealing from me. My mother let out a sob. It was a ragged, broken sound. I only wanted to help him, she cried. Gesturing to Lucas, he needed it more. Scarlett, you were always so strong. You were always capable. Lucas, he needed the net. I was just balancing the scales. I looked at her, and in that moment, I understood everything. I wasn't just the unfavored child. I was the fuel source. In her mind, my strength was a penalty, and Lucas's weakness was a virtue that required constant subsidy. She hadn't realized that by cannibalizing me to feed him, she was starving us all. You weren't balancing the scales. Mom, I said, my voice trembling. You were breaking my back. We sat there in the silence of the aftermath. The truth was out, ugly and raw on the conference table. I need a break, I said. I walked out into the hallway. I needed air. I needed to escape the suffocating gravity of my family. I walked toward the water cooler at the end of the hall. Apt Scarlett? I turned. Noah was standing there. He must have been waiting in the reception area. He looked older than 13. He looked tired. Noah? I said, softening. Hey, I heard shouting, he said, looking at his shoes. Is Uncle Lucas yelling again? A little, I said. We are working it out. He looked up at me. His eyes were dark and serious. I am sorry, he said. I frowned. What are you sorry for? You didn't do anything. I am sorry I'm expensive, he whispered. I am sorry everyone fights about money because of me. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. I ignored the pristine crease of my trousers against the carpet. Noah, look at me. None of this is your fault. Not one bit. You are a kid. You are supposed to be expensive. I do not want to go to Sterling Ridge, he said, the words rushing out in a whisper. I hate the robots. I want to go to the public school with my friends. I want to draw comics. But Dad says if I quit, I'm wasting the investment. I took his hands. They were cold. The deal I'm making in there? I said, it puts the money for school in a special account. And do you know who gets to decide what school you go to? Who? He asked. Technically, a nice lady named Mrs. Higgins who works at a bank. I said, but she is going to listen to you if you want to go to public school. The trust pays for it. If you want art lessons, the trust pays for it. His eyes widened. Really? Really? I said, your dad cannot stop you. He looked at me, and his lower lip trembled. I just want them to stop being mad, he said, and I want Emma to like me. Emma loves you. I said, she is just protective of her mom, like you are protective of yours. He nodded, sniffing. I stood up and hugged him. He hugged me back, a fierce, desperate grip. Go back to the lobby. Noah, I said, it is almost over. I walked back into the conference room. The energy had shifted. My father was sitting with his head in his hands. Lucas was staring out the window. Have you made a decision? Vanessa asked. My father looked up. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see judgment in his eyes. I saw defeat. Where do I sign? He asked. Charles, Lucas hissed. Sign the paper. Lucas, my father said, his voice flat. She has us. And she is right. We did it. We justified it. But we did it. Charles reached for the pen. He signed the statement with a shaky hand. Then he pushed it to my mother. She cried as she signed it, her tears spotting the paper. Then the document slid to Lucas. He stared at it. He looked at the clause that barred him from accessing the money. He looked at the clause that admitted to the credit fraud. I cannot sign this, he muttered. It destroys my credibility. If this leaks, it won't leak, I said. It is a private settlement. Unless you violate the terms, then it becomes public record. Lucas looked at the door. He looked at the evidence file. He realized he had no moves left. The golden child had finally run out of runway. He picked up the pen. He signed his name with a violent scratch. There, he spat, shoving the paper away. You win. You are the winner. Scarlett, are you happy? I picked up the document. I looked at the signatures. The chains that had bound me to their dysfunction for 30 years were finally broken. I am not happy. Lucas, I said, I am just free. The Horizon Path deal closed 3 weeks later. The press release went out on a Monday morning. Horizon Path. Acquires micro-scholarship platform Brightnest for $500 million. The headline flashed across the crawler on CNBC. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in high school. LinkedIn crashed from the traffic to my profile. I sat in my office with Jonah. We had a bottle of cheap champagne, the same brand we had drunk the night we launched, sitting on the desk. "So," Jonah said, swirling the glass, $200 million. "How does it feel?" I looked at the bank app on my phone. The wire transfer had hit that morning. The number was so long it required 2 commas. "It feels quiet," I said, and it did. The noise was gone. The panic about rent, the fear of the car breaking down, the dread of the phone ringing with a family emergency I couldn't afford to fix. It was all gone. But the work remained. As part of the deal, Horizon Path had agreed to my condition: the creation of the Brightnest Foundation. $50 million of the purchase price was funneled directly into a nonprofit endowment. The foundation's mission was simple: to find the kids who were slipping through the cracks, the Mayas, the Kevins, the Noahs who needed a different path. I walked over to the window. Down on the street, life was moving at its frantic pace. "What about the family?" Jonah asked. "I heard from the trustee." I said, "Noah transferred to the public high school yesterday. He signed up for an art elective." "And your parents?" "They are in the house." I said, "The annuity is paying the mortgage. They are safe, but we do not talk." Jonah nodded. "Sometimes safe is better than close." 4 years later. The auditorium of the State University was packed. The air smelled of floor wax and lilies. I sat in the front row, wearing a dress that cost more than my old car, but holding the hand of a 16-year-old girl who still wore Converse sneakers with her formal wear. Emma squeezed my hand. "He is next," she whispered, on the stage. The dean leaned into the microphone. "And now, the recipient of the first annual Brightnest Arts Technology Scholarship, Noah Harris." Noah walked across the stage. He was tall now, lanky, his hair a little too long. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a button-down shirt and clean jeans. He didn't look like a robot. He looked like a teenager. He took the diploma and the scholarship check. He looked out into the audience. He found us in the front row. He smiled. It wasn't a polite smile for the cameras. It was a real smile. I looked at Emma. She was beaming. "He did it," she said. "We did it," I corrected. After the ceremony, we met outside in the sunlight. Noah hugged Emma. Then he turned to me. "Thanks, Aunt Scarlett," he said. "For the scholarship?" I asked. "For the art class," he said. "Back when I was 13, that saved my life." I watched them walk ahead toward the reception. 2 cousins who had survived the wreckage of the generation before them. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the foundation. New application received. A student in Ohio needs $400 for welding certification. I smiled. I wasn't Scarlett the victim anymore. I wasn't Scarlett the bank. I was Scarlett the builder. I had built a wall to keep the toxicity out. And then I had built a bridge to let the future in. My parents had demanded I give them my daughter's college fund. I had refused. And because I said no, I was able to say yes to 1,000 other kids who just needed someone to believe they were worth the investment. I put my phone in my pocket and walked into the sun, ready to get back to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Family and money are the 2 most volatile substances on Earth, and when you mix them, the explosion can either destroy you or clear the path for something better. I hope Scarlett's journey reminded you that you never have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel, and if you enjoyed Scarlett's victory, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have more tales of justice, resilience, and turning the tables coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Scarlett was too hard on her parents, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know what you would have done in her shoes. Until next time, keep building your own future.